Hey there! Welcome to Books Podcast. In today's episode, we are here with another amazing book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And in this podcast, we will get to know about the powerful principles that can help you build strong relationships, win people over, and become more influential in both personal and professional life. Stay tuned as we dive deep into the timeless wisdom of this classic. All right, so we're diving into these excerpts you sent from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right.
You want to really get a grip on the core principles, especially how they apply today, right?
Yeah.
Well, get ready, because even though this book was published way back in the 1930s,
Yeah.
it's got some stuff that is still so relevant.
It really does. You know, it's interesting how Carnegie went about creating this book.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him, sitting at a desk just thinking about things.
Right.
He was like digging through piles of articles and court records.
Wow.
He even paid people to go to libraries and research. He was obsessed with figuring out how human interaction works.
Yeah. I was surprised by how much research went into it.
Yeah.
What was the goal of all that research?
Carnegie wanted to help people.
Yeah.
People like you to tap into their potential when it comes to relationships. And not just making friends, but, navigating all those tricky situations
Right.
where you need to work with people,
Yeah.
persuade people, or even just understand people better.
Like he's giving us the cheat codes for social interaction.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And, it's not just about, being charming or manipulative or anything.
Right.
Carnegie connects this back to a quote from Dr. John G. Hibben,
Okay.
who was president of Princeton University.
Mm-hmm.
And Hibben said, "Education is the ability to meet life's situations."
Wow.
Carnegie's principles are all about giving you tools to navigate those situations effectively.
I see. So it's less about surface level charm.
Yeah,
And more about deeper understanding.
exactly.
I like that. What's one of the most important tools he gives us?
One of the most powerful
Yeah.
and maybe unexpected ideas is the futility of criticism.
Mm.
Carnegie really goes all in on this one.
Okay.
He uses this example of Two-Gun Crowley,
Okay.
this notorious criminal,
Right.
who even when facing execution,
Yeah.
refused to admit he did anything wrong.
So even a hardened criminal couldn't handle criticism.
Couldn't handle it.
That's a strong statement.
It is.
Yeah.
And it illustrates a point that a lot of us miss.
Okay.
Criticism, even when we think it's justified,
Yeah.
rarely leads to positive change.
Mm.
In fact, it makes people more defensive and less likely to change their behavior. It's almost like a psychological reflex.
So how does Carnegie suggest we handle those situations where somebody's really messed up or we need to give feedback?
He uses a really interesting example of Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Even Lincoln, who we, think of as a compassionate leader,
Right.
initially drafted this harsh letter
Yeah.
to General Meade
Uh-huh.
after Meade failed to capture Lee's army at Gettysburg.
But Lincoln didn't send the letter right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lincoln realized that sending that letter wouldn't accomplish anything.
Right.
It would just damage Meade's morale
Uh-huh.
and probably make him less effective as a general.
Right.
It's just fascinating to think that even Lincoln, someone we hold up as a model of leadership,
Yeah.
had to wrestle with these impulses to criticize.
So you're saying we should never criticize anyone. That seems a bit extreme.
He's not saying all criticism is bad. What he's saying is we need to be more strategic about how we deliver it. He suggests before we criticize, we should think about how Lincoln would have handled the situation.
I see. If Lincoln had to pause and reconsider,
Yeah.
maybe we should too.
Mm.
What's the alternative to criticism? How do we motivate people to improve without pointing out all their flaws?
That's where another core principle comes in genuine appreciation.
Okay.
And it's important to distinguish this from flattery, which is insincere
Right.
and manipulative.
Yeah.
Appreciation comes from a place of genuine recognition and respect.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this genuine appreciation.
Carnegie uses Charles Schwab, the steel magnate, as an example.
Okay.
Schwab believed that one of the biggest keys to his success was praising and encouraging his employees.
Mm.
He focused on their strengths,
Yeah.
celebrated their achievements, and made them feel valued.
So instead of tearing people down, you build them up.
Exactly.
It sounds simple, but is it really that effective?
I mean, Schwab wasn't just some softie.
Right.
He was a tough businessman who built a massive company.
Yeah.
He was known for being incredibly generous with his praise. He even said, "I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people the greatest asset I possess."
Wow.
He saw praise as a tool for unlocking people's potential
Right.
and getting the best out of them.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could be more effective than constantly pointing out what people are doing wrong.
Uh,
Do you have another example?
sure, how about Florin Ziegfeld?
Okay.
Legendary Broadway producer,
Yeah.
famous for transforming ordinary girls into captivating stars.
Mm-hmm.
His secret. He focused on seeing their potential and building their confidence through genuine appreciation. He made them believe in themselves, and they shone as a result.
You know, those examples are really starting to make me think differently about how I approach interacting with people. It's almost
Like you're speaking a different language.
yeah.
Like instead of the language of criticism and judgment, you're speaking the language of encouragement and possibility.
And that shift in language speaks to something fundamental about human nature,
Yeah.
the desire to feel important. Carnegie argues that this desire is one of the primary drivers of human behavior.
It's like that story he tells about the kid who finally starts eating his vegetables.
Right.
Not because his parents lecture him about nutrition, but because they promise that doing so will make him strong enough to stand up to a bully.
Exactly. That story perfectly captures how understanding and leveraging this desire for importance can be surprisingly effective. It's a far more persuasive approach than simply trying to impose our will on others.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we all crave feeling important, how do we tap into that in a way that feels genuine?
Right.
Not like we're manipulating them or anything.
Yeah, it's not about being fake.
Right.
One thing Carnegie talks about is showing genuine interest.
And it's not about fake compliments or pretending to care about things you don't.
Right.
It's about actively listening, asking questions, and trying to understand the other person's perspective.
But isn't that a bit time-consuming? I mean, do we really need to deep dive into everybody's stamp collection to build a relationship?
Well, it's not about becoming an expert in everything.
Right.
It's about the attitude you bring to the interaction. Carnegie tells this story about a salesman who, by just showing genuine interest in a client's hobby, stamp collecting of all things,
Right.
was able to learn a ton of information that actually helped him in his work.
Oh, so by listening and showing interest, the salesman was able to build rapport
Yeah,
and learn something valuable.
exactly.
It's like that saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a much more effective approach than, just barging in
Right.
with your own agenda. There's this other story Carnegie tells about this guy, C.M. Naffel Jr.,
Okay.
who spent years trying to sell fuel to this chain store.
Yeah.
He kept getting rejected because he was so focused on his sales pitch that he never bothered to understand
Right.
what the client actually needed.
So he was basically talking at them, not with them.
Exactly.
Did he ever make the sale?
He did. It wasn't until he shifted his focus from selling to understanding
Okay.
that he finally closed the deal. He realized he needed to learn about their business,
Right.
their challenges, and their goals. And once he did that, he was able to tailor his pitch and show how his product could help them.
It makes me think of that ancient Roman poet Publius Syrus, who said, "We are interested in others when they are interested in us." It's like a two-way street.
It's reciprocal.
Yeah.
When you show someone that you value their thoughts and experiences, they're much more likely to be receptive to your ideas and perspectives as well.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how this fits together.
Yeah.
You build trust and rapport by showing genuine interest, which then makes people more open to hearing what you have to say. It's less about manipulation and more about creating that connection.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you say, it's also about how you listen. Carnegie talks about letting the other person do a lot of the talking.
Right.
He tells this story about a salesman who landed a huge contract by simply being a good listener.
Okay.
The client talked himself into the deal.
So sometimes the best way to sell something is to just shut up and listen.
Sometimes, yeah.
Interesting.
Active listening is so powerful. It shows respect,
Right.
builds rapport,
Yeah.
and allows you to gather valuable information. And it's not just in sales. Think about job interviews.
Okay.
Carnegie tells a story about this guy, Charles T. Cubelis, who landed his dream job by doing his research beforehand and then letting the interviewer talk at length about his accomplishments.
Oh, so he basically buttered him up by showing interest in his work.
It depends on how you approach it. Cubelis wasn't being fake. He was genuinely interested in the work the company was doing.
Okay.
And he saw the interview as an opportunity to learn from someone he admired.
So it's not about flattery. It's about finding genuine points of connection.
Yeah,
I can see how that would be more effective than just reciting your resume.
exactly. And sometimes even the smallest gestures can have a huge impact,
Yeah.
like a smile.
Okay.
Carnegie shares this heartwarming story
Mm.
about this homesick girl in a hospital
Mm-hmm.
who was comforted by a student nurse's genuine smile. It reminded her that there was still kindness in the world.
But people can tell if a smile is fake, right? Do you think it really makes that much of a difference?
It does.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like a subtle change in your tone of voice over the phone.
Right.
A genuine smile signals warmth, openness, and approachability.
Mm-hmm.
And these are qualities that are essential for building trust and rapport.
So even in a world of virtual meetings and emails,
Yeah.
these small nonverbal cues still matter.
Absolutely. And speaking of small things that make a big impact,
Yeah.
let's talk about remembering names.
Okay.
Carnegie tells the story of Jim Farley,
Mm-hmm.
this political figure who rose to prominence despite limited education,
Right.
largely because he had this uncanny ability to remember people's names
Yeah.
and make them feel valued.
Okay, I'll admit I'm terrible with names. Do you have any tips for remembering them better?
Well, Carnegie suggests a few strategies.
Okay.
One is to repeat the person's name several times during the conversation.
Okay.
Another is to associate their name with something memorable,
Uh-huh.
like a physical characteristic or a shared interest.
Right.
And of course, there's always the classic technique of writing it down as soon as you meet them.
I like that idea of associating names with something memorable.
Yeah.
It seems like that would make it easier to recall them later.
Yeah, and it's not just about memorization.
Mm.
It's about showing the other person that you care enough to remember their name.
Right.
It's a small gesture.
Yeah.
That goes a long way in building rapport and making them feel important.
It's funny how these seemingly simple things,
Yeah.
like smiling and remembering names, can have such a profound impact on our interactions.
Totally. And it all ties back to that fundamental human desire to feel important and respected.
So we've talked about genuine appreciation, showing interest, listening actively, and even remembering names.
Right.
What else can we do to connect with people on a deeper level?
One of Carnegie's most powerful suggestions is to talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Okay.
He tells the story of Hall Caine, a blacksmith's son,
Uh-huh.
who became a successful writer
Mm-hmm.
after connecting with this famous artist, Dante Gabriel Rossetti.
Right.
Caine was a huge admirer of Rossetti's work, and he wrote him this letter
Yeah.
expressing his admiration.
Mm.
That simple act of appreciating Rossetti's passions opened doors for Caine and led to a mentorship that shaped his whole career.
So by finding common ground and expressing genuine appreciation for someone's interests, you can create a powerful bond.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
It's like you're speaking their language.
Mhm.
You're showing them that you understand and value what's important to them.
It's like when you meet someone who loves the same obscure band as you.
Right.
Suddenly you feel like you have this instant connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of sparking enthusiasm,
Yeah.
Carnegie was a big believer in tapping into people's natural desire to achieve and excel.
Okay.
He tells this great story about Charles Schwab
Yeah.
using a simple chalk mark,
A chalk mark. Okay.
to motivate workers to increase production.
How'd that work?
Schwab noticed that one of his steel mills was lagging behind in production.
Yeah. Huh?
So at the end of the day shift, he asked the manager for a piece of chalk
Yeah.
and wrote a big 6 on the floor,
Mm.
representing the number of units they produced that day.
That's it. Just a number.
That's it.
I would thought he'd give him a pep talk or something.
I know.
Oh.
Believe it or not, that's all it took.
Huh.
The night shift, seeing that 6, felt challenged. They wanted to outdo the day shift.
Right.
So they worked harder and ended up producing 7 units.
Oh, okay.
Schwab then wrote a big 7 on the floor, and the competition continued.
Wow. So by simply tapping into their competitive spirit
Right.
and desire for achievement, Schwab was able to increase production without even saying a word.
Exactly.
It's kind of like those step counting apps that motivate you to walk more by showing you how you're doing compared to your friends.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's all about framing things in a way that appeals to people's inherent motivations.
Okay. This is starting to feel less like a self-help book and more like a psychology textbook. I'm really enjoying this deep dive.
Me too.
There's so much here.
There is.
So we've talked about appealing to people's desire for achievement, but how do we get them to actually say yes to our ideas?
Well, Carnegie highlights the importance of starting off on the right foot.
Okay.
He uses this phrase about getting the other person saying yes, yes, immediately.
Oh, I like that. Yes, yes. Sounds so agreeable.
Yeah.
So how do we get those yeses rolling?
It's all about finding common ground early on in the conversation.
Mhm.
Instead of starting with points of disagreement, Focus on areas where you and the other person already align.
Right.
Carnegie gives this great example of a salesman who wanted to rent a ballroom.
Okay.
The manager wanted to increase the rent by a ridiculous 300%.
Ouch. That's a tough negotiation.
It is,
But,
but instead of arguing,
right.
the salesman skillfully steered the conversation toward points they could both agree on.
Okay.
He focused on the advantages the manager would gain by keeping the rent lower,
Uh-huh.
like having the ballroom available for more profitable events.
So he basically found a win-win scenario.
Exactly.
I guess it's true what they say. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Exactly. And this leads us to another crucial principle, respecting the other person's opinions. Even if you completely disagree with someone,
Yeah,
arguing with them is rarely productive.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I've lost a few arguments in my time.
Carnegie tells this funny story about getting caught by a mounted policeman for walking his dog without a leash.
Oh, no.
Instead of arguing with the officer, he admitted his mistake openly and enthusiastically.
Okay.
And to his surprise, the policeman was incredibly kind and understanding.
Maybe that's the key. Kill them with kindness.
It might just be,
Yeah.
Carnegie actually takes this a step further.
Okay.
He says, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically.
Sounds tough. Swallowing your pride isn't always easy.
It's not. But Carnegie argues that admitting your mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
rather than defending them,
Yeah.
can actually strengthen your relationships. It shows humility, honesty, and a willingness to take responsibility.
I guess it's kind of like that saying, I'm big enough to admit when I'm wrong. It takes a strong person to do that.
It does. And it can be incredibly disarming. Think about a time when someone sincerely apologized to you for something they did wrong. Didn't it make you more likely to forgive them?
It definitely does. It shows they respect you enough to be honest with you.
Exactly. Now, imagine applying that principle to all your interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Not just when you've made a mistake, but even when you simply disagree with someone.
So instead of saying you're wrong, you say, I understand why you feel that way, but from my perspective.
Exactly. It's about validating their feelings.
Right.
Even if you don't agree with their conclusions. And Carnegie has this magic voice for doing just that.
Okay, what is it?
I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Wow, that's a mouthful. But I can see how it would instantly diffuse tension
Yes.
and create a sense of empathy.
It does. It's like you're stepping into their shoes
Yeah.
and seeing the world through their eyes. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that everyone, even those who disagree with us,
Right.
is acting based on their own experiences and beliefs.
Okay, that makes sense. So we talked about empathy, admitting mistakes, and starting conversations on a positive note.
Right.
What else can we do to really win people over?
Carnegie suggests appealing to the nobler motives. He believed the people are inherently good and want to do the right thing.
That's a refreshing perspective.
It is. It's easy to get cynical these days.
It is.
But Carnegie believed that by appealing to people's higher selves, their sense of fairness, justice, and compassion, we can inspire them to act in ways that benefit everyone.
I love that idea. It's like you're giving them a chance to be their best selves.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly powerful. Carnegie tells a story about John D. Rockefeller,
Okay.
who, during a time of labor unrest and violence, won over his striking workers
Wow.
by appealing to their sense of fairness and shared humanity.
So instead of fighting fire with fire,
Right.
he used empathy and understanding to de-escalate the situation.
Exactly. He recognized that everyone wants a better life for themselves and their families.
Right.
And he appealed to that desire.
It's a great reminder that even in the most challenging situations, there's always room for compassion and understanding.
There is. And sometimes a little bit of drama can help too. Carnegie was a big believer in dramatizing your ideas.
So don't just present the facts.
Yeah.
Make it entertaining.
Exactly. He uses the example of this Philadelphia newspaper that was struggling to increase subscriptions.
Okay.
They tried all the usual tactics, but nothing worked.
Yeah.
Then they had this brilliant idea. They started publishing stories about their delivery boys.
So instead of talking about the newspaper itself,
Yeah.
they focused on the people who delivered it.
Right. They shared these heartwarming anecdotes
Okay.
about the boys' dedication, their hard work, and the challenges they faced each day. These stories created an emotional connection with readers,
Wow.
and subscriptions soared.
That's amazing. It reminds me of those commercials that tug at your heartstrings.
Exactly. It's about making your ideas come alive
Right.
in a way that resonates with people's emotions.
Yeah.
And finally, Carnegie emphasizes the power of throwing down a challenge.
So give people something to strive for.
Exactly. He tells a story about Al Smith,
Yeah.
who needed to find a warden for Sing Sing prison.
Tough job.
Tough job. He offered the job to Louis E. Laws
Okay.
by framing it as a challenge that only the most capable and courageous individual could handle.
So he appealed to Law's sense of pride and ambition.
He did, and it worked.
Yeah.
Laws accepted the position
Wow.
and went on to have a successful and impactful career.
It's a great reminder that people are often motivated by the opportunity to prove themselves.
They are. And speaking of motivation,
Yeah.
Carnegie's final principle is one that can transform our interactions with others. Begin with praise and honest appreciation.
So start with the positive before addressing the negative.
Exactly.
I like that.
Carnegie believed that starting with praise creates this more receptive atmosphere,
I know.
making people more open to our suggestions and less likely to get defensive.
It's like that saying, catch them doing something right. It's much more motivating than constantly focusing on their mistakes.
Exactly. And it all ties back to that fundamental human desire to feel valued and appreciated.
So after this deep dive into how to win friends and influence people, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's the importance of approaching our interactions with this genuine desire to understand and connect with others.
It's not about manipulation or tricks.
Right.
It's about building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and understanding.
And it's about believing in the power of human connection to make the world a better place.
So go out there and practice these principles. You might be surprised at the positive impact you can have on the people around you.
And remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into how to win friends and influence people.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep making the world a more enjoyable and productive place. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Books Podcast for more such amazing podcasts.